Hello, everybody. I'm here today to talk about radical ad tech, talk about some of the counterintuitive ideas that come up in web performance when you're working with ads. So who am I? Sergey just introduced me. I'm a senior software engineer. I'm an ad specialist. My name is Kat, and I'm here to show you how you can push the limits of your ad stack and improve your user experience doing it. And so, on each page with ads, there is an auction that happens. And you might end up introducing a horde of bidders who are competing over your precious website. How do you manage to preserve your product while competing with this horde? Well, to find out, let's take a closer look at what goes on here. You have ad scripts for your auction that load in the header, and this is why it's called header bidding. If pre-bid is the horde, pre-bid is the third party, and it controls the horde of bidders, then Google tag is Genghis Khan. It is the leader of the horde. Google tag orchestrates all the other bids through a Google ad slot on your page, which is a iframe element. And it introduces its own demand as well and chooses the winner of your auction. Let's take a closer look at the ad slot element. So if you go on any page with ads, pretty much any of them, they're going to be using Google tag. And you can say Google tag.openConsole inside of your dev tools and view information about the results of the auction, where the ad slots are, and you'll also notice that they're served in iframes. A lot of things in ads are served in iframes. Yes, good. An iframe is effectively a page within a page. It loads a specialized URL, a specified URL, which can come from any third party. Each iframe has its own separate layout engine, its own DOM, and you can imagine this gets pretty performance heavy. Despite their performance issues, though, they are good for isolating themselves from the rest of your site, especially if they're sandboxed specifically. They can't read content outside of themselves, so that's a pretty good idea, so that your ad partners can't read from your website. Well, iframes were originally intended to be viewable on the page, and that's what Google Ad Slots do. A lot of the time, advertisers and other third parties will also put other data into hidden iframes on your page. And you can imagine iframes plus a bunch of hidden data is a huge performance killer. Here's an example of it. This is called user sync, and this is something that advertisers do in hidden iframes. So your browser loads an iframe from your ad exchange, and then it reads its own cookie from the browser. It's like, hey, this is user123 to us, an anonymized ID, right? And then that iframe redirects it to a partner domain if these two ad exchanges are partners. And it says, okay, the new one says, oh, we have user 456. So now both of those ad partners know that user 123 and user 456 are the same, and they create a mapping that allows you to be tracked across sites. It's pretty great. Get rid of them. No, but even if you're running this process, usually it doesn't run for very long after the page load completes. But these iframes still hang around, taking up a bunch of memory and being high in overhead for no reason. So what you can do is you can go in and remove these iframes manually after like a minute or so. And when I did this, it resulted in a memory reduction of 40% with no effect in ad revenue. Wait a second. Okay. Here is another thing that affects your site, cumulative layout shift, which we just saw happen. As your page loads, do you get the joke? Okay. It can often be tempting to use collapsible ad slots in the case that for whatever reason an ad doesn't fill. This is perhaps an attempt at elegant error handling, but it can often lead to a degraded user experience because it shifts around the page and everything. Cumulative layout shift is one of the core web vitals, and it's how Google measures your page performance. And you want to know how Google measures your page performance because it affects your search rankings. So what can we do instead? One method to fix this is to avoid ads with embedded content. This is where classic sidebar ads are really good. They have high viewability. They have excellent profitability because of that. There's nothing wrong with a sidebar ad. But if you want something more trendy, what you can do is have an infinite scroll feed on your site and load the ads within your scroll feed chunk. So it doesn't have to wait for the ad specifically to load. It loads it with the content of your scroll feed. If you must have the ads in a spot that gets in the way of the content and it's in your initial page load, you can sell your own demand in case the ad doesn't fill. Upsell your own subscriptions. Ideally, you're getting a high fill rate on such a high visibility ad, but in the case that it doesn't, advertise yourself. Server-side rendering is another thing that is really good for your core web vitals. It populates your page with content before it gets the first initial page response, which is what search engines look at. It's also what your user looks at. But for ad tech, you're gonna not want to load your ads with your server-side render. This is primarily because it's heavy. It's secondary to the latter concerns of making sure that users can view your content, users see the page, that it's seeable by search engines, but also because it's important to have interactivity enabled first. These are interactive things. They run a lot of JavaScript. So when you have server-side rendering, you have the data fetching, you have the server rendering. After you get the HTML response, that's going to be when you start loading your ad scripts. Now, speaking of these, the good news is with these ad scripts is that a lot of them work with command queues. So your pipeline, your ads rendering pipeline can start consuming commands as soon as the scripts decide they're ready instead of waiting for something external that presumes it isn't. One thing that's very good to do with this is single request architecture. There's also queues on the server side in GAM, and this is how your ads, this is where you add your ads to your client-side queue. Where you add them makes a big difference because you might think you want to fire off multiple separate ad requests as soon as you can, but these requests are queued on GAM server, so they'll still be answered sequentially. Once the request has to finish and get a response, one request has to finish and get a response before the next request is filled. This makes it beneficial to send all of the requests in a single block. So to tie this all together, header bidding plus server-side rendering plus single request architecture is delicious. That's header bidding, server-side rendering, single request architecture. Got it? So once your ad scripts load, you can kick off a pre-bid auction and you can let your page hydrate, define all of your slots, and once the pre-bid auction finishes, you have all of these requests in your queue, and as soon as that finishes, you can send out a request to GAM, and it finishes defining everything right as the pre-bid auction completes, and it sends it in one single request. It's delicious, really. How do we do all of these things? when you're proposing radical methods at your company, you have to make sure that you have rock solid testing. And if we're working with black box systems, it's all about what it needs and what it does. What are your desired outcomes? One way you usually measure the outcomes is changes through A/B tests. That's when you have a feature flag and a bunch of if statements that, enroll random users in different code paths. It gets out of hand pretty quickly. You end up with an exponential number of states in your code that are impossible to check and track. And one way you can solve this is iterating quickly through canary deploys instead, which is technically a kind of A/B test. Usually when you have continuous deployment, you have a load balancer that swaps your traffic to a new deploy, right? So you can instead configure this to swap traffic slowly to percentage allocations. And you do that every deploy, you effectively got a quick A/B test. Are you sure it works? Are you really sure? The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. And this is, unknown unknowns that gets thrown around a lot, maybe by leadership. What about the unknown unknowns, right? This is interesting because the origin is Donald Rumsfeld. He was the Secretary of Defense, and he was responding to the lack of evidence of nuclear weapons in Iraq. So do with that what you will. But the thing is that you can't calculate the probability of what you haven't imagined or observed. It's by definition an unknown unknown. But what you can measure is, in the event of extreme changes, how your systems pay off changes as a function of that, regardless of what the events are. So, for example, one way that you might do that is you have a bounded loss versus your unbounded upside. So you lose $100, but you might gain $10,000. This is the actual probability there doesn't matter so much as the payoff structure. And it's effectively a stop loss, right? Canary deploys, great for this. You can also build in redundancy. So this is where having a horde actually comes in handy, because if, say, Amazon ads go down, pre-bid is there to step in. And other bidders will usually kind of pick up the slack because now they're winning the auction. They're like, oh, hey, we're winning the auction. This is great. This has a convex curve response structure, which is something that Nassim Taleb describes in Antifragile, which is this response here, where there's a diminishing respect on the revenue loss relative to the amount of bid pressure you're losing. So, yeah, this is the end. Thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to my Substack. If you have any questions, leave a comment down below or just ask now.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathryn. Hi. Can you just, what is GAM first?
Oh man, sorry for Google Ad Manager.
Google Ad, okay.
I know, the acronyms, man.
Yeah. And what is a canary deploy?
It's what I described basically. So you have a load balancer, right? When you do CI/CD, you have a load balancer, and that's kind of the thing that swaps from one deploy to another, right? And when you usually do that, you do that pretty quickly when you do a deploy, right? Okay, we're using this new version now. So what it does, instead of going straight to the new deploy, you direct traffic over there gradually. Like, hey, 1%. Maybe I should pull up the slide again. Too far. Okay. So you have you direct gradually more and more traffic to the other deploy. And while you're doing that, you have metrics and monitors and Datadog or something that you're looking at. And you can check that against, like, even threshold monitors, right? Like I want to see, hey, did we lose all of our ad requests in this new deploy? If so, let's not keep deploying. Let's automatically roll back to the other thing. Yeah.
Hi. For the cumulative layout shift that you talked about, is that assuming that the ad slot has no layout? Because I'm under the impression that ads have specific sizes. If you know the size of the ad that's supposed to be there, can't you put a placeholder that's exactly the width and height of that so that you can prevent the layout shift?
Yeah. That's what I mean by having a kind of house ad, right? To upsell yourself. You put a placeholder in there. You can put anything there, I guess. Like logos, branding. Typically, you put branding in there. But the nice thing about you don't necessarily need to load a placeholder because your auction is usually fast enough. What I'm proposing is that you kind of add your placeholder to the auction as something like, you can set that in Google Ad Manager, like this is a low priority ad. So if there's nothing else, then it'll serve.
Hi, I was wondering about the pre-bid. Do you guys use pre-bid server or are you using the client integration?
Well, it's a both kind of thing. You never don't have a pre-bid server instance, although usually you kind of rent it from somebody. But we use server bidding for some things. A lot of bidders don't go for server-side bidding. So you kind of have a little mix of both. You kind of put server-side bidding in whenever you can.
And what number of bidders have you found, like, when you get to that peak of diminishing returns?
Like 10.
Okay. Seems like a lot.
It's a lot, yeah.
So that's like one network request per bidder every ad slot?
No, it's not a network request per bidder. You have pre-bid sends out like 3 network requests. It has a couple of partners, and that sends all of the bidders.
Like on the server side?
Yeah.
Got it.
Can we not have ads? Is that an option?
Yes. But you should ask me about that separately.
All right, hey, so I have very little experience with ad tech, so it's a very basic question, but how do you know that the advertisers that you are potentially allowing to bid are not going to load like incredibly clunky stuff on your site? Is there any way to evaluate that before potentially having them show up and slow everything down?
Yes, there's a lot to that, and it's never perfect. Usually there's a company that does this called Boltive, formerly AdLightning, that can kind of help you say, hey, this is content we don't want to show up, or this ad loaded terribly. And if you go back to here, you notice that you can kind of get some information about like exactly what the ad is here. It's got like a line item ID, for example, right? And if you end up seeing a bad ad on your site, what you can do is kind of grab that information and say, hey, this was a bad ad, get it reported, and then like block that specific creative.
I actually have a follow-up to that myself. In the past, when I worked at a company that didn't use the bidding, they ran their own, basically their own sales and everything. It was relatively challenging, but at the same time rewarding to work with ad sales teams to create those kind of policies to avoid this. Is there some kind of policy conversation you can have with your exchange, I guess, or exchanges to accomplish that?
You're saying like you want to have like kind of specific third-party deals that are like, hey, this is. It sounds like a PMP deal, is what you're describing. Which.
Okay, that's an interesting word. I have no idea what that is.
Yeah, I'm less familiar with the sales side of things myself,
no
but it's From what I've seen, that's a kind of a thing that our ads sales team will do. They'll set up PMP deals, which are with our third-party vendors, and it will be a little bit more specific. And you can potentially get higher CPMs, cost per millions, which is cost per thousands, which is how we price ads, better prices, basically. higher bids.
Yeah, and that's why they did their own, because they were able, that company were very high in the bidding, and so they could afford very expensive ads. So.
Yeah, usually I found that a mix of both is good. You can have direct sales, but also have some programmatic. Your programmatic should compete with it, right? You want to have like a free and open market, right? And part of that is involved in having direct sales and also making sure that your sales team can compete with the programmatic market, right? And oftentimes direct deals can be a little too specific. You might not be able to sell all of your inventory, so programmatic can be a great backfill to that as well. Yeah.
Sorry, I just thought of this, but as far as performance goes, what would be a like Goldilocks zone of too slow, where you know like you're doing well with the positioning, the loading of the ads, as far as loading the jobs at the right time? Like, what would be too long to wait for ads to show? What would be your aim?
I'd say A/B test that like crazy. It's really a trade-off that you got to make with your product team, and it really depends on what your product is. But I would A/B test that, measure it, and be like, okay, when we tweak this, our ad revenue increases by 5%, but there's a performance trade-off here, and the performance gets worse. So, but if we make ads slower or we defer it in the page load, it's better for our users, but we earn less money, kind of thing. There's no one real good answer to that, I don't think. But they shouldn't be taking 5 seconds, probably.
Okay, another question from someone who doesn't know much about ad tech. When you said that you were removing iframes from the ads, don't the advertisers notice that you're manipulating their ads? And if not, what's stopping you from removing even more?
No, they don't notice, and there's nothing stopping you. It's something that they should really clean up themselves, but they don't. And
Not after yourself.
yeah. I gotta clarify too, I'm not talking about the iframes that are actually visible. I'm talking about the invisible ones. If you killed the iframes that are visible, you'd probably have a bad time.
Okay. Thank you, Kathryn.